Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of the Cross-Cultural Psychology Asian presentation. As you already know, we're talking about the Japanese culture. So thank you, Grace, for that awesome presentation. Now we're going to be talking about the differences in the cognitive process within the Japanese culture and comparing that with a culture that hits a little bit closer to home, the Western American culture. So shall we begin? Every environment has their own specific cultures, and that's no different with the Japanese culture. Comparing that with the American culture, the Japanese culture is vastly different. As my classmates have mentioned before, there's a pattern between their relationships, whether that has to do with dating culture, marriage culture, or even that between parents and children, or where the society stands with the Hofstadter 6 taxonomy. These aspects impact the way that each cultural group thinks and their attempts to solve situations. They're completely different. Because of the cultural differences, there will be different expectations of educational values and learning, how people observe their environment, their perception on mental health, displaying of emotion and affection such as that of PDA or even within the household, and even their spirituality. So let me elaborate. Culture indicates that there's going to be a difference between their thought process. There's also going to, and that elaborates to there being a difference with the educational aspect. So the educational aspect is widely different between the Japanese and the American style. There in the Japanese culture, there's an emphasis on manners. So for the first 3 years, they are taught manners, how to clean, even basic cooking skills. In elementary schools, there are no janitors to clean up after the students. The students would take an hour to 2 hours of time after school to make sure that they have cleaned the entire campus. Japanese also focus their attention on school tutoring. So even after their classes, after cleaning the school, they attend tutoring classes, and that helps them prepare for the entrance exams, which is a very important part of the Japanese culture. Um, they even have cultural classes that they have to take. So while the United States focuses on the culture of sports, the Japanese culture focuses on their ancestral cultures. So learning the dialects, learning how different artworks are made. They also have more school uniforms. It's a standard across the board. And usually in Japanese culture, there's only a one choice of a college. So they either make it to that college or they don't go to college at all. Whereas in the United States, we focus on a well-rounded education. There is a lot of aspects towards after-school sports or even physical education, and sports teams are the norm within the United States culture. We also focus more on having multiple choices in colleges. So we have a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 colleges that we can choose from, and with whatever score we get on our college exams, we have different options to go to those colleges. Whereas in Japan, as I said before, you have one college that you choose, and if you don't make the score for that college, you're not likely to go to college. The United States also allows for different programs to enter college. We have technical schools, and we have liberal arts schools like Wheaton, and we have specified schools that focuses on like gen eds and a specific major. Japanese culture as a whole has a more collective mindset, making it so they're more concerned about what they can do for the society rather than what society can do for them, as in American culture. So this relates back to schoolwork, where it's culturally normal for students and adults to think alike and think of things as a more holistic and a wholesome way. For example, in the train spotting study, East Asians were more likely to observe the surrounding of the train picture, so they're more focused on the background, whereas in Western cultures like America, they're more likely to focus on the foreground, therefore focusing their attention on what seems more important to them. In a sense that relates to psychology, because when you look at things more holistically, look at things more in the bigger picture, it shows that you have a broader aspect to a certain problem. Whereas if you focus things on a narrow subject, you're more likely to view things as closed-minded. So In this study, the Japanese were more likely to recall the background details, whereas the Americans would not notice what's going on with the background. In Western cultures, as I said before, Americans were more likely to focus on the foreground and less likely able to focus on the background contextual information. So in the Eastern culture, especially in Japan, context was everything. As Japan is a collective country and focuses their attention on what the individual can do for their country, it is culturally normalized for them to view that how they can self-sacrifice themselves to better their nation. While as Christians and as Americans, we believe that life is precious and that there's a significant value, in Japanese culture, once you're seen as a burden to others, it is more noble to end your own life to prevent burdening your society and family. Within the Japanese cult community, we often hear about suicide as a cultural norm. This traces back to the days of the samurai, where they would rather kill themselves in form of seppuku rather than go back to their homeland or their town as a survivor. Survivor's guilt was never really a thing in the Japanese culture. This culture is very much full of shame. It's very much a shame culture, and they'd rather die than to be a shame unto the family. In modern day Japan, the most reports that we hear about depression and suicide is during finals week. In Japan, during finals week, they would actually lock up the rooftops to prevent students from jumping off the roof if they were to get a bad grade on their final or their college exam. Mental health is definitely on the decline with adolescents, but depression and anxiety, they're not reported in the sense that it is in America. They're more likely to express it in their physical form as fatigue or stress or the body hurts and there's aches and pains. It is a belief that depression or any mental health issues is seen as a energy flow such as qi, and many believe that if they are to suffer from mental health, that they're losing their control. Therefore, again, going back to the collective society, if you're losing control, not able to benefit your society, it is better to end things. Also, because Japan has a very moral and a very shame-felt kind of society, it is considered morally unacceptable to feel this certain way. Whereas in the United States, it is shameful to actually end your life. There's a stigma to ending your life in our society. We're more likely to take medications for it, as it's seen as a mental health issue is a chemical imbalance. And reports that are reporting people that report depression are more likely to express their emotional symptoms such as I feel sad, I don't feel good, rather than express the physical symptoms. Within the Japanese culture, you're not likely to see a lot of PDA or even affection from parents to family or even from significant others. Going to Japan, I've also seen where families are saying goodbye to each other. They're not likely to kiss or hug each other, they're more likely to give bows of showing off respect. Emotions are also kept in check and are held within the household. Outrages or bursts of outrages are not known to happen in public. Also, if you are to have public displays of affection or have any emotional moments in public, you're most likely to get judgmental stares directed your way. Whereas in the United States, we are very open with our affections and our emotions. You can go down to a college campus and see PDA happening. Not at Wheaton though, because, crush from afar. You're also more likely to have more openness when it comes to relationships and emotions. And if you don't show emotions, you're considered weird and segregated in our culture. You also see the emotional outbreaks that happens with children in our cultures when they don't get what they want. For example, that candy bar that they want at the grocery store. Whereas in Japan, you most likely will not see that happening. Japan is often known for their spiritual culture. However, they're siding towards a non-spiritual culture. So it's a yin and a yang effect. They're spiritual, but they're also not. Often, many people believe that there is a spirit attached to every living thing, whether it is a tree, an ant, or even the moon. This idea of Shintoism has been passed down for centuries, and this usually causes for the culture to be more inclusive and may also be why there's such a respect towards the elders and family. Shintoism also involves the almost the ancestral worship where they will bow, they will give offerings to their dead ancestors in a way to appease them. In the United States, however, it is founded upon the ideals of Christian values. However, there's no set religion that everyone in America has to follow. Though most people self declare that they are Christians, they may or may not be practicing that faith. Now, I am going to pass off the rest of this topic to Matt, who's going to continue.